You were doing fine. That is the part that makes this so disorienting. You were not in a fragile place. You had not had a bad day, a vulnerable night, a moment of weakness that opened the door. You were going about your actual life. Something ordinary, a task, a walk, a song that came on without warning. And then, without invitation, without build-up, without any logic you can account for, it was there. The pull. Not a memory, not grief, not the longing you have learned over these months to sit with until it passes. Something more immediate than any of those. A directional sensation, almost physical, like a compass needle swinging toward north. Like something in your body that has been oriented in one direction, suddenly tightening and pointing somewhere specific, toward him. And the maddening part, the part you cannot reconcile with everything you have been building in yourself, is that you were not looking for it. You were not thinking about him. You had finally arrived somewhere real. A genuine quality of your own presence in your own life. Not performing okayness, but actually feeling it. And then this. Right now. This week. This pull arriving like something that did not ask your permission. If this landed for you in the last few days, if you felt the pull return without warning after a period of genuine peace, leave a like and subscribe to stay connected. Drop, I feel it and I trust it in the comments right now. Because what you are feeling is not a setback. It is not your healing unraveling. It is something the sky has been building toward, and it has a name, and it has a mechanism, and by the end of this, you will understand exactly why it arrived when it did. Something happened today in the sky that is directly connected to what you have been feeling. Today, March 13th, 2026, Mars conjuncts the North Node at 8 degrees Pisces. Let that sit for a moment before we break it down. Because this is not a minor transit. Mars is the planet of drive, of forward momentum, of the thing in you that cannot stay still when it is pointed at something real. The North Node is the point of destiny in a chart, the direction the soul is being pulled toward in this lifetime, the place where growth lives, the place where what is meant to unfold unfolds. And today these two meet in Pisces, the sign of deep water, of soul memory, of love that exists below the level of the rational mind. Mars meeting the North Node is not a transit about decision. It is not a transit that asks you to think through something carefully and arrive at a reasoned conclusion. Mars conjunct, the North Node, is a fated activation. It is the moment where what was always going to happen begins to feel undeniable. The energy of destiny moves through the planet of action and enters the present moment, not as a concept, as a felt experience in the body. This is why the pull feels different from the ordinary longing you have become familiar with in this journey. Ordinary longing is retrospective. It looks backward at what was. It lives in the memory of him, in the feeling of what it was like when things were different. The pull you are feeling right now is not retrospective, it is directional, it is pointing forward. There is a quality to it that has nothing to do with missing what was. It is more like sensing what is moving toward you. Mars in Pisces has been building this for weeks. Mars, in the sign of deep feeling, in the sign of spiritual water, has been taking the action impulse and dissolving it into something more diffuse, more intuitive, harder to pin down. He has been feeling this too. The difference is that he does not know what to do with it. You, by contrast, are in a position to receive it without being destroyed by it. And that difference is not accidental. Mercury is still retrograde in Pisces. Mercury turns direct on March 20th, 1 week from today. The retrograde is pulling old channels open. Pathways of communication that went dormant during the separation are being cleared. Old frequencies that carried information between you are transmitting again. This is not metaphor. There is a mechanism underneath it. We will get to that. For right now, understand what this day is cosmologically. This is a fated activation. The sky arranged itself today in a way that is specifically designed to make the unavoidable feel unavoidable. What you are feeling is not weakness, it is accurate. It is a precise instrument responding to a precise cosmic event. Dorothy Tenov was a psychologist who spent decades studying what she called the most intense and poorly understood form of human attraction. She named it limerence. Limerence is not a poetic word for love. It is a specific psychological and neurological state that Tenov identified through interviews with hundreds of people across years of research. She was trying to understand why certain connections feel different from others, why certain people cannot simply decide to stop thinking about someone, why, regardless of circumstances, regardless of time, regardless of logic, regardless of what would be more practical or more rational or less painful, certain connections keep asserting themselves with a force that does not respond to willpower. What Tenov found was this. Limerence is characterized by three things that distinguish it from ordinary attraction or ordinary love. The first is involuntariness. The limerent object, her term for the person who is the focus of the state, enters the mind without invitation. You are not choosing to think about them. They arrive. Mid-task, mid-conversation, midnight, mid-ordinary moment. The arrival is not controlled by the conscious mind. It operates below the level of decision. Tenov found that people in limerence could not, no matter how much they wanted to, simply choose to stop. The thoughts arrived independent of intention. The second is intensity and specificity. What Tenov called intrusive thinking. Not general thoughts about someone, but specific and vivid and detailed. The way they said a particular thing, the quality of a specific moment, the texture of an exchange that lodged in the nervous system and keeps replaying with a clarity that ordinary memories do not have. The intensity of the intrusive thinking in limerence is not proportional to the amount of contact. It persists across distance, across silence, across time. The third, and this is the part most relevant to what you are feeling right now, is what Tenov called the uncertainty factor. Limerence intensifies specifically in conditions of uncertainty. The intermittent signal, the connection that is real but unresolved. The relationship that was too significant to categorize as ordinary but too incomplete to categorize as settled. Tenov found that resolution in either direction, a clear and mutual commitment or a clear and mutual ending, reduced the intensity of limerence. But uncertainty, particularly the particular uncertainty of a connection that has genuine depth but no current form, sustained and in some cases amplified it. You are in a limerent dynamic. Both of you are. And the Mars conjunction to the North Node today is activating the neurological mechanism of that dynamic in a way that neither of you can fully manage through ordinary effort. This is not dysfunction. This is not something to be treated or resolved or deprogrammed. Tenov herself was careful about this. She was not pathologizing the experience. She was naming and mapping something that exists and that has its own logic and its own purpose. In the context of a twin flame connection, limerence is the psychological language for something the spiritual community has always known. That certain connections are not something you enter voluntarily and cannot be exited voluntarily. They have their own timing, their own momentum, their own destination. The pull you are feeling today is the limerent mechanism responding to a fated transit. It is not your imagination. It is not emotional backsliding. It is the most precisely calibrated part of you responding to the most significant day in this current astrological sequence. You might be asking why now. You have had hard days in this journey. You have had the grief and the longing and the low periods and the days where the connection felt unbearable. None of those produced what you are feeling right now. So why today? Why this week specifically? The answer is in what the North Node does. The North Node is not a planet. It is a mathematical point, the intersection of the moon's orbital path with the ecliptic, the apparent path of the sun. In astrology, the North Node represents the direction of soul growth, the future, the place the collective soul and individual souls are being drawn toward in this chapter of time. It is always moving, slowly backward through the zodiac, spending about 18 months in each sign. Right now it is in Pisces. Pisces is the sign of everything beneath the surface, of the unconscious and the spiritual and the soul-level recognition that operates below the rational mind. Pisces does not work in logical sequence. Pisces works in waves, in sudden clearings, in moments of recognition that arrive without preamble and that cannot be traced to a single cause. The North Node in Pisces is pulling the collective in the direction of soul-level knowing, not intellectual knowing, not the knowing that can be argued for with evidence, the knowing that simply is, that you do not reach through analysis, but that arrives complete in a moment of stillness. And today Mars, the planet of action and momentum and the forward-moving impulse, sat down exactly on that point. Mars conjunct the North Node is an activation of fated direction. It is the moment the soul's trajectory, which has been a felt sense and an interior knowing, suddenly acquires momentum. Velocity, the feeling that something is actually in motion, not just potential but actual, not just possible but moving. This is why the pole returned today in the specific quality it has. Not yesterday, not last week, not 3 months ago when you were in the depths of the grief and the longing would have made more obvious sense. Today, because today the sky created the precise configuration that activates the fated nature of this connection and puts it in the body as a directional sensation rather than an idea. Both of you felt this. She felt it as the return of the pole, arriving against everything she had built to manage the distance. He felt it as the return of her, specifically. Not a general restlessness. Her presence in his thoughts with a vividness and a specificity that his ordinary daytime management has not been able to contain this week. She arrives in the middle of what he is doing and he cannot fully account for why now rather than some other time. The intrusive thinking that is characteristic of limerence, the involuntary return of the specific person to the foreground of consciousness regardless of effort, activated for him today, at a level that surprised him. He is not reaching out. Not yet. But he is not as far as he was last week. Something shifted in the landscape of his interior today, and the distance that felt manageable yesterday feels different today. Here is what is happening in the nervous system during a limerent activation. Tanev documented the phenomenology of limerence, what it feels like, what characterizes it, what conditions intensify or reduce it. But the neuroscience of why it works the way it does has been developed since her original research, and it fills in a picture that is remarkably consistent with what twin flame journeys actually feel like from the inside. When two people form a deep attachment, particularly one characterized by the intensity and the nervous system activation that the twin flame dynamic consistently produces, the brain creates what neuroscientists call an attachment neural network, a specific constellation of neural pathways that carry the memory, the pattern, the felt sense of the other person. This network is not stored in the conscious, accessible memory the way that ordinary memories are. It is encoded at a deeper level, in the limbic system, and specifically in the amygdala, the part of the brain responsible for emotional memory and for pattern recognition in conditions of significance. The attachment neural network, once formed at the depth that characterizes this kind of connection, does not degrade with time the way surface-level memories do. It maintains its activation potential. It stays, in the language of neuroscience, primed, ready to fire, waiting for a signal that matches the pattern it was built around. Under ordinary circumstances, the network hums in the background. It is there, active at low frequency, producing the sense of connection that persists even through silence and distance. This is why you cannot fully stop thinking about him even during periods of relative peace. The network is not gone. It is simply below the threshold of conscious awareness most of the time. What Mars conjunct the North Node does today, at the level of lived experience, is functionally equivalent to a significant signal reaching that network. The fated activation that the transit produces in the felt sense of the connection matches the pattern the network was built around. The network fires. The pull becomes conscious and immediate and physically felt rather than background and managed. This is not spiritual bypassing. This is not using cosmic language to avoid the psychological reality. The cosmic and the psychological are not in opposition here. The lived experience of a fated transit activating a deep attachment is both a real astrological event and a real neurological event simultaneously. The two frameworks describe the same thing from different directions. What you are feeling in your body right now is accurate information. It is your nervous system's most precise record of what this connection actually is, responding to the day the sky arranged itself to activate that record. You did not imagine it. You cannot logic your way out of it, and you do not need to. He has been managing. That is the word for what he has been doing in the weeks and months of this separation. Not healing in the way that implies a linear progression towards some resolved state. Managing. Keeping the interior at a temperature that allows him to function. Staying above the waterline. Moving through his days in a way that looks, from the outside, like someone who has put something down and kept walking. What he has not been able to fully manage is the intrusive thinking. Tana's research on limerence identified this as the feature of the state that is most resistant to willpower. You can choose not to act on a feeling. You can choose not to reach out. You can choose to redirect your attention when it drifts. But you cannot choose not to have the intrusive thoughts. They do not respond to the decision not to have them. They arrive on their own schedule, at their own frequency, with their own content, regardless of what you would prefer. He has had them throughout this separation. He has managed them mostly, kept them below the surface enough to maintain the distance he chose. But today, something different happened. The thoughts arrived with a specificity and a persistence and a physical quality that his ordinary management cannot buffer. She was in his mind this morning with a clarity that felt almost like a presence. Not like remembering someone, like someone being in the room. This is what Mars conjunct the North Node in Pisces does to a limerent neural network that was primed for this person years before today. Pisces dissolves the boundaries between the interior and the exterior, between the felt sense and the physical sense, between what is remembered and what is experienced. Mars in Pisces does not push through walls the way Mars in Aries does. Mars in Pisces seeps. It finds the permeable places, and the most permeable place in his entire carefully managed interior is the part that holds her. The attachment neural network that was built in the specific shape of this connection, and that no amount of distance has been able to dismantle. She got through today, not because he let her, because Mars conjunct the North Node in Pisces activated a level of his nervous system where the decision of whether to let her in is not available. The amygdala does not ask permission before it fires the pattern it was built around. He is sitting somewhere in his life right now, doing something ordinary, and she is more present to him than she has been in months. He is not sure what to do with this. He does not have a frame for it. He does not have the language for what fated activation feels like from the inside of a person who is not oriented towards spiritual or astrological frameworks. He just knows that today is different, that something arrived that he did not send for, cannot entirely dismiss. And in the 10 of model, this is exactly the moment that matters. This is the moment the uncertainty factor, the primary sustainer and intensifier of limerence, begins to shift slightly. Not toward resolution, not yet, but the quality of the uncertainty changes. Something that felt stable in its incompleteness yesterday is less stable today. A door that felt fully closed is less fully closed. He has not made a decision. He is nowhere near a decision. But today, the interior landscape around you is different than it was last week. Here's the thing you need to understand about what you are feeling right now, and this is the part that separates what this journey has been building in you from what it would have found in you 18 months ago. You can feel the pull and not be consumed by it. This is new. This is the result of everything you have been doing, all the genuine interior work, all the genuine grief processed rather than bypassed, all the genuine contact with your own life as something that belongs to you regardless of what he does or does not do. It has built something in you that is different from what was there before. And the difference shows up most clearly at moments like this one, when the pull returns in full force and you feel it without losing the thread of yourself inside it. 18 months ago, the return of the pull would have meant a specific thing, It would have activated the anxious attachment response, the monitoring, the checking, the interpretation of every ambient signal as either hope or rejection, the collapse of your own center of gravity toward the event horizon of his silence or his contact. The pull would have felt like urgency, like something requiring immediate response. That is not what is happening now. What is happening now is that you can feel the pull, feel its full force and its full reality, and remain upright inside it. It arrived and it did not knock you over. It arrived and you recognized it. You felt the full weight of it. And you're still here, still in possession of your own ground, still able to think, still able to be curious about what it means rather than only anxious about what it might cost. This distinction is what attachment researchers call earned security. The capacity to tolerate intense attachment activation without the activation hijacking the entire system. It is not the absence of feeling. It is not detachment. It is not the ability to not care. It is the ability to feel everything, the full amplitude of what this connection produces in you, without losing your own coherence inside the feeling. You did not have this at the beginning. Most people do not. It is built through exactly the kind of journey you have been in, through having to return to yourself again and again, through loss and silence and grief and the grinding ordinary work of continuing to live while something enormous was unresolved in the background. It builds slowly. It is not a decision or an achievement. It is an earned quality of the nervous system that accumulates through genuine contact with difficulty, and it changes everything about what the pull means now. When someone in anxious attachment feels the limerent pull activate, the pull is experienced as information about the other person. It points outward. It says he is moving, something is shifting, do something, reach, monitor, respond. When someone with earned security feels the limerent pull activate, the pull is experienced as information about the connection itself, not information requiring immediate action. Information. The felt sense of what is real between you, arriving in a moment of particularly clear transmission because the sky today arranged itself to make the channel visible. You can receive that information without acting from it. You can hold it as signal without mistaking it for instruction. That is not coldness. That is the most sophisticated relational capacity there is. Mars conjunct the North Node is not a transit that rewards waiting. Let me be precise about what that means and what it does not mean. It does not mean you should reach out. It does not mean you should position yourself more visibly, create more opportunity for contact, or do anything in his direction that you would not have done yesterday. Mars conjunct the North Node is not asking you to pursue. Pursuit is not the action this transit is calling for. What this transit rewards is forward movement in the direction of your own destiny. The North Node is the soul's direction. When Mars activates it, the reward goes to whoever is moving toward their own North Node, their own fated growth, their own becoming. The person who acts on this transit by moving forward in their own life, by taking the step toward the thing they have been building, by saying yes to the opportunity that has been hovering in their peripheral vision, by making the decision they have been sitting with, that person gets the full force of this transit working in their favor. And here is the thing about twin flame dynamics in the North Node. When the divine feminine moves toward her own destiny, when she stops organizing her forward motion around his readiness and starts organizing it around her own soul's direction, she creates a kind of gravitational event. Not manipulative, not strategic, not performed, genuine. The genuine forward movement of someone who has found the direction of their own growth creates a pull that is the complement of the pull she has been feeling. He feels her moving, not metaphorically. In the Limerence neural network, in the attachment circuitry that is calibrated to her specifically, he registers when her orientation shifts. When she moves toward herself with genuine commitment, the signal in his nervous system changes. The quality of what she represents in his interior field becomes something different. Not the person who is waiting, whose waiting has become ambient and manageable. The person who is going somewhere, and the somewhere she is going is somewhere that matters. Mars conjunct the North Node is asking you to identify the forward step in your own life that you have been not quite taking. The thing you know is next. The direction you can feel but have been delaying because it required more commitment than you were ready to give while the situation with him felt unresolved. It is asking you to take it, not for him, not to produce a result in his direction. For yourself, for the life the North Node is pulling you toward, for the future that exists with or without his participation. The taking of that step is the action Mars is calling for today. There is a version of the word fated that strips agency out of the picture entirely. That makes destiny into a story that happens to you, that turns the twin flame connection into a script written somewhere else that you're just performing. That is not what fated means here. The Mars conjunction to the North Node today describes a moment of fated activation, a moment when the connection that has always been written into the structure of this particular relationship, this particular soul pairing, makes itself felt in the body in a way that cannot be rationalized away. The cosmic alignment today is real. The fated quality of this connection is real. And both of those things coexist with full human agency. They are not in contradiction. What Limerence research actually shows, when you look at the data, is that limerence is not an obstacle to genuine love. It is the neurological and psychological signature of genuine love operating at depth. Tainov herself, despite sometimes being criticized for describing love too clinically, was very clear about this. The Limerence experience is not a distorted or disordered version of love. It is love in its most urgent and undeniable form. The intrusive thinking, the involuntary return, the intensity and the specificity and the persistence, these are not symptoms of something gone wrong. They are the evidence of something real. In the twin flame framework, limerence is the psychological language for soul recognition. The intensity is proportional to the depth of the soul-level connection. You cannot manufacture this quality of experience with someone it is not true about. The neural pathways do not build this way for people who are not genuinely significant. The attachment system does not maintain this level of activation for years across silence and distance for a connection that was not genuinely profound. What you are feeling today is the evidence, not evidence that you should act, or that he is about to act, or that the reunion is imminent in any specific timeline you can count on. Evidence that the connection is what you always knew it was, that the knowing you have been carrying through everything, through the months and the grief and the work and the doubt, that knowing was accurate. The Mars conjunction to the North Node today is the sky confirming, in the most direct language it knows how to use, that what you felt was real and that what it is pointing toward is real too. The pole is not confusion. The pole is the most honest thing in you, responding to the most honest thing in the cosmos today, about the most honest connection of your life. You are not imagining it. You are not weak for feeling it. You are precisely, accurately, incredibly well calibrated for what is actually happening. So here's where you actually are today, at the end of this transmission, with Mars conjunct the North Node at 8 degrees Pisces, with Mercury retrograde still clearing the channels, with the pull alive in you and him closer in his interior than he has been in months. You are not required to do anything with this information. You are allowed to simply know it, to let the knowing settle into you without generating a plan, without translating it into action, without immediately directing the energy it has produced toward anything outside yourself. Tainov's research made an observation that most people in limerence wish they had understood earlier. The intrusive thinking, the involuntary return, the pull itself. These things are more painful when they are fought. When the person in limerence spends energy trying to stop thinking about the limerent object, using willpower to redirect, using avoidance to create distance from the thoughts intensify. The suppression effort feeds them. What Tainov found and what subsequent psychological research has confirmed through what is called ironic process theory is that the deliberate attempt not to think about something dramatically increases the frequency with which it is thought. You do not have to fight the pull to be okay. You do not have to make the pull stop in order to maintain your own wholeness. You can let it be present. You can feel it fully. You can acknowledge to yourself without performance and without drama that it is real. That it arrived today because something in the sky created the conditions for arrival, that it is information about what is real between you, and that it does not require anything from you right now. Let the signal be a signal, not an emergency, not a directive, not a failure of your healing. A signal, accurate information from the most reliable instrument you have, about a connection that has never stopped being significant regardless of what form it has or has not taken. Mercury turns direct on March 20th, 1 week from today. When the retrograde lifts, there is often a settling of the clarity that has been moving in pieces during the retrograde itself. Things that felt confusing or fragmented begin to cohere. Communication channels that felt muddy begin to clear. What you understand about this connection on March 21st will have a different quality than what you understand today. Not because new information arrives necessarily, because the processing completes. Between now and then, the practice is reception rather than response. Let the Mars conjunction to the North Node do what it is designed to do. Let it activate the fated quality of this connection in your body and in his. Let the signal transmit. Let it land in him in the ways it is already landing. Trust that fated things do not require management to unfold. You have been in motion for a long time in this journey. You have been working and processing and becoming. Today, the sky is not asking for more of that. Today, the sky is asking for the thing that is hardest for someone who has been in motion, to be still, to receive, to trust that the pull arrived on schedule, that it is pointing at something real, and that the something real is finding its own way toward you. You do not need to reach for it. It is already in motion. Let it come.